episode 15, when we're talking about trauma. Last week's post, actually this week's posts, we talked about, or I posted, trauma first, growth second. Trauma affects everybody differently. It can stem from childhood. It can stem from relationships. It can stem from culture. It can stem from so many different areas, so much input, so many different facets of life. We are traumatized humans, right? I don't think there's one person I know that hasn't been through something traumatic, right? And so with trauma, we have to take the deep dive and figure it out. Because I see a lot of parents that I work with and that I come into contact with that haven't dealt with the trauma. And like I mentioned through previous videos, is that if you don't know yourself, or if you're not in a place of understanding who you are, then how are you going to parent, or how are you going to teach, or how are you going to do these things for other people who are more malleable, right? Or who are more pliable, or who are more dependent on you. And so by trauma, for example, right, and I've explained time after time again that the emotional and sometimes physical abuse that I received when I was a child, right, with my stepfather, that was suppressed until I started therapy 3 years ago. And 2 years into therapy, I finally figured it out, like, wow, I'm this way because of everything that was suppressed, for 28 years or 26 years, right, throughout, my parents' marriage. And so I respond this way. I talk this way. I act this way based upon the trauma that I received and the feedback that I received when I was a child. And so now that as I mentioned last week in my post, now that I know better, it's time for me to do better. So I can't carry my trauma into my next relationship or just being negligent, right? Or ignorant on like, all right, yeah, I know about it, but I don't really care, because that's going to affect my partner. That's going to affect the other people that I might work with or that I might partner with, right? And so by unearthing that trauma and getting to the root of things, parents, you'll be able to understand your direction. You'll be able to understand what triggers you. You'll be able to understand, like, damn, like, my dad really yelled at me when I did this, and now I find myself yelling at my child in the same way. Okay, let's not do that, because this is a new generation. I'm breaking that generational curse. I'm working on things that I want to create for the next generation. And so that trauma, when you guys start figuring it out, is going to be scary. It's going to be alarming. It's going to be emotional. Man, I had to have some talks with, my mom just on like, was it really like this? Or what was your thoughts through this process? Or for the 26 years that you guys were married, what was going on, right? And so a lot of that stuff was, man, it was dark and it was scary, but I'm glad I came out to the other side, because now I'm a better person. So as you guys work through your trauma, make sure you and your partner or significant other are on the same page, right? Because if you've worked through your trauma, your triggers, your emotions, all that stuff, and then your partner hasn't, then there's going to be that disconnect that's going to make a rift between the family dynamic, right? And so if we focus out on parenting, you have a different parenting style than your partner, then the two are going to collide. You guys can only put it off for so long before you two start verbally sparring at each other, or saying, hey, I told him to do this, well, I told him to do that, and then there's a situation. And so the only way that we can grow is that we work through our trauma, right? We can put on this facade as, okay, yeah, I'm growing, I'm building, I'm a better person today than I was yesterday, but that's all a lie if you haven't worked through your trauma, because eventually you're going to have to get through that, right? Because if you haven't worked through your trauma, it's still going to be that wagon that you're carrying to every event, to every relationship, to every communication, to every interaction that you have, until you unhitch that wagon, accept it, and grow from it, right? And so we know better and we do better because of the baggage that we unpacked and that we chose to turn into something positive, or that we turned into a learning experience. So parents, I want you to work through your trauma. Find a therapist, find a support group, book an appointment with me. Let's talk it out. Let's work through it, and we can make your next decisions, your next steps, better ones. Because right, if we haven't dealt with the past, then we can't go on to the future and act like the past never happened. Because like I said, it's just going to be just chilling right behind us. So work your trauma. Let's get you there. I appreciate you guys as always, and then I'll see you next week.